reality is our preferences based on our options influences how we perceive the world. It influences how we think about people, what we think about people, how we engage people around us. These things are optional. We have seen and read stories through reporting that about people getting in rabbit holes related to information. How they start to get fed information over and over again based on what they're watching or looking at. I notice even with me, like, hi everybody, Lee Scott here. Thank you for watching and or listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee, where we talk about life, leadership, and legacy, and want to help you unleash your capacity and level of leadership. I'm so excited that you are here, and I have something great to share today. But if you have not done it yet before I get started, go and subscribe to Leading with Lee right now on YouTube and all podcasting platforms. I'm so excited to share today because this is a subject that I kind of been thinking about over the last few weeks as it relates to some of the changes that have been happening in our society and culture. And it's really been something that has come up a lot for me in the conversation. But before I share my topic today and just kind of share some things that's been going on in my mind, I want to give my definition of leadership. I do it every single week, every single time here on Leading with Lee. And so let's get right into it. I always say that leadership is seeing something that has not happened yet and taking people, organizations, and personal processes in that direction. Leadership is seeing something that has not happened and taking people, organizations, and personal processes in that direction. Over the last few weeks, I've had this cool experience in my life of coming in contact with people that have impacted me at some point in my journey. As I've shared on here before, I work for an education foundation, and one of the things that I've got an opportunity to do is go back to schools and engage educators in ways that has been very fulfilling for me as someone who doesn't necessarily have an education background, but more of a college access opportunity that I get to do every single day. I've been having the enjoyable experiences of going back to even my alma mater, Murrah High School, and engaging with folks who work with high school students in particular. And just so happened a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to go to an event that was hosted by Jackson Public Schools here in Jackson, Mississippi. And it was an incredible event to go to because at this event, there was a woman that I go to church with that runs this organization within JPS that tries to give resources to communities throughout our city. But at this event, I went with my coworker, and it was so interesting because something unexpected happened. I walked in this room where there are different booths and different tables, and I went to one table in particular and was asking about some programs that Jackson Public School has. And then she asked, the woman that I was talking to ended up asking me my name. And I was told her who I was. And then I looked at her for a second and we looked at each other and we realized that we knew each other. Come to find out that this woman just so happened to be my 6th and 7th grade math teacher when I went to People's Middle School here in Jackson. And I had a great conversation about just my life, what's been going on. And she had mentioned some of my classmates to me. And I was like, oh my gosh. And, it just brought so many memories to my mind and really made me think a lot about where I am in my life and how much I've grown since being in middle school. And I even asked her about former teachers and different things like that. And she talked about different individuals that were a part of that time in my life. And I found it to be so impactful and interesting for me. And I was like, oh, that's just really cool. I saw one of my old teachers, Ms. Robinson, and she just was so great and so gracious to me and just asked me what was going on in my life and different things like that. And then something else happened at that event that I was not expecting. As I was leaving, I ended up going back because they had been giving away books for students and families to read. And my colleague, she was like, hey, Lee, I think you should go get a few books. And I thought about it, well, I have nieces and a nephew, and one of these days I may have children. I would love to have some books for them to be able to read. And so I go over to the table where the books are, and I'm trying to quickly pick up some books and get out of there. And there was these two ladies sitting at the table, and they were like, "Hi, how are you today?" And I'm doing well. I just trying to get some books real quick, get out of here. And then one of the women says to me, "You seem like you're in a hurry. Do you really need help with this?" And immediately something triggered in my mind. And I stopped what I was doing and I looked up, and it was my elementary school principal, Miss Johnson, Principal Johnson. I have literally not seen this woman in 20 years. And it was such a cathartic experience. It was like literally my 8-year-old self showed up, my 10-year-old self showed up. I was so blown away by seeing her because I have literally not seen her since I left Lake Elementary 20 years ago, 21 years ago. And I was so shocked by this experience. And it was so powerful for me because just simply talking to her about my life and what's going on and all the things that are happening with me. And we had this whole conversation about how my kindergarten teacher is now end up becoming the principal of that school and how she's retired, how Principal Johnson is retired now, and she just come back and help the day. And it was just such a powerful experience. And it got me to thinking about this idea that I want to particularly share today. Because remembering these teachers or having these encounters with educators I've been having over the last year or so has brought this into my mind a great deal. Even as I've gone to my alma mater, source, my high school, and talked to former teachers. I literally a few weeks ago was at my former high school and was speaking to a class where my former speech and debate teacher walked in the room, and he and I had a great conversation. I remember when he first came to my school and was started the speech and debate team. And so it was really interesting, but it brought me to this subject today that I want to share. Under the influence, what shapes us? So today I'm going to talk about how these different situations in life, we are shaped by a set of experiences and we're shaped by things. And this is what brought me to this idea, because I think we're in a moment where what we have been influenced by is going to determine a lot of the outcomes in our life, a lot of the decisions that we will make around how we live our lives, what we choose to engage in, what we don't choose to engage in. All those things are affected by what we have been influenced by. We must understand that influence can be conscious and unconscious. There are things that you do in your life right now as a byproduct of conscious thoughts, things that you have conceived or were told or you were engaging in, and there are just some things that's been happening in your life that you just unconsciously don't even realize that you do as a result of osmosis. It could be environmental, it could be a variety of things. So we're going to talk about that today. And I thought I saw this powerful quote that I saw as I was doing my research by Albert Schweitzer, and he says, example is not the main thing in influencing others. It is the only thing. Meaning, how we influence people is literally what we do. We're being all influenced by something or someone in that case. But I got 3 points today, and I'm not going to really be before you long. But my 3 points, as we talk about influence today, are number one, external. We're going to talk about external influences. Secondly, geographical influences. And then lastly, we're going to talk about optional influence. So let's spend a little bit of time on the external influence. Now, when we talk about external influences, you can look at that a variety of ways. A lot of times external influences are sometimes not by choice. It could literally be the byproduct of environment. For instance, your family. You did not choose your family. The reality is your first teachers are your family. Whether you have a healthy and productive relationship with your parents or grandparents, or if you grew up in foster care, or if you grew up in a single parent home, or you grew up with not only your parents, but your grandparents living in a house, if you're the only child, if you have siblings, your birth order, all those things affect you by virtue of you being just in that environment. It's not something that you actually picked, but you're just there. There are things that are affecting your life by virtue of you literally being a part of that family. No matter if it's good or bad, these things shape the way you see the world. I was having a conversation with someone at a conference a few weeks ago, and we were talking particularly about somebody I knew, how this young woman saw her mother have her at a very, very young age. Her mother was probably in her mid to late teens. And because of her mother's experience, she made a determination in her mind that she would not live the same life that her mother lived, that she would wait to have children, that she would intentionally engage in healthy and productive conversations to ensure that she did not repeat what she saw happen with her mother. It's not that her mother was a bad person or her mother was any less than, but she had made a conscious decision because she watched what her mother went through with having her very young. And she saw it as a lesson in how she should operate in the world. That was an external influence. And she was raised by her mother and actually her grandmother in her life. That external thing really made a big difference in how she perceived relationships, how she perceived love, how she perceived interest in being in a connection with someone, what things she valued in relationships. All those things were influences every relationship she has been in since that time in her life. And it's fascinating because that's not something that she could control. It's just a reality of the environment that she was in. This is the external thing that was happening in her life. Friends are people that can affect or influence how we operate in our world, either by choice or by circumstance. Most of us have become friends with people by virtue of circumstance, if we be honest with ourselves. Most of us, we have had long time friendships is generally because you met them in school or you were in a club or something, you played sports and you became friends with a person. Those were things that you kind of, this by circumstance. It's just, you just haven't been in the same class. You just happen to be in the same part. I've had one of my best friends on here, Deja Brown, who literally, Deja and I have been friends for literally 15 years. We've known each other since we were in 10th grade. But the reality is Deja and I are friends because of circumstance. We went to the same high school. We were both in vocal performance at Murrah High School, and we were the only two kids in our grade that were in that program at the same time. And so we built a connection, a relationship because of that reality. And so there were some things that happened because by virtue of circumstance. Even we can look at it with work. Sometimes you can choose who you engage with, who you have relationships with, who you talk to, who you do things with, because those things are by choice and by circumstance. We choose these things and we engage in those ways by virtue of that. But it's important for us to know, it's important for us to keep in mind that as we're determining who we're going to be in relationship with, as we are determining who we're going to do life with, that we know for sure that they will have an influence on us and we will have an influence on them. The other place, as I spoke about, honestly, it's great talking about school. I've thought a lot about how influence of how we operate as far as organization is concerned has been influenced a lot by the environment we've been in at school. Many of us are creatures of habit. We all have experienced being in elementary school, how we had assigned seats when we were growing up at school, how we had this experience of being told, hey, you got to sit in this specific spot, because if you sit in this very specific spot, we're able to take attendance for you every single day. And we do that probably unconsciously now. I think about the meetings that I have at work, me and my coworkers. We do not have to sit in the same place during our team meeting, but we sit in the same exact spot every single time because unconsciously we've been trained or influenced to do a specific thing every single time because it makes us feel comfortable and makes us feel safe. And one of the things that we have to recognize that is a byproduct of influence. Those things shaped how we think about life. Those things shape how we think about self-preservation. Those things shape how we consider our decision making. And we do it even now. We do not have to sit in the same place, but we do it because we were trained to do it as kids when we were in elementary school. And it has stuck with us in our adulthood. And one of the things I think is really important is that you and I recognize and be aware of the fact that we have been influenced, that we have things in our life that have shaped us and caused us to be who we are and how we are. And that is okay. Those external things have taught you what to do and how to do it in your life. The second thing is geographical. It's literally the land or space we live in. There are things that I do as a result of me being a Mississippian. I am a Mississippian through and through. I am a Mississippi boy with my whole heart. And there are some things that I do as a result of me being a Mississippian. And one of the things that is important for you to keep in mind is that it's not that you were told to do it a particular way, but just your culture, that you're coming from a culture, you're coming from a system and environment that teaches and encourages certain things around you. There are things that you just do because I do literally because I am a Mississippian. The way I drive, the way I engage community, how literally this is such a Southern thing that we do, that we will be on the elevator or somewhere with somebody, never met them a day in our lives, but we will sit there and have a whole conversation with them about whatever, or about the current thing that's happening in front of us. Most people, if you depend on where they are in the country, that seems weird to them. But that's just a thing that we do in the South. It means nothing to us, yet we engage one another in this way because that is something cultural, or that is something geographically that we do. And it's really important for you to know that and be aware that that is a cultural thing that has influenced the way you engage people. When I go to different parts of the country or engage different people from different places, they're amazed by how we talk to each other. They're amazed by how we speak, how we do different things, all these different things. And when we come in contact with other people, they're kind of like, oh, okay, that's how you go. Okay. But that's a byproduct of my geography. The way I dress is the byproduct of geography. It's October right now. And yet we are still wearing shorts and t-shirts. With some people in some parts of the country right now, they are wearing sweaters already. We have not had sweater weather yet. We are still experiencing 80 to 95 degree weather here in Mississippi. That's a reality. That just is literally what we are dealing with as a byproduct of the environment that we're in, because that is what's happening. How we prepare for things is a byproduct of our environment, our geography. When I lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I have more winter clothes and more winter jackets right now. I'll be wearing a lot of jackets right now. I think about those 8 years, so 7.5, 8 years that I lived there. I'm dressed a particular way because it wasn't because I just wanted to be cool or have a style. It's because reality was I actually needed to. The environment required that I dressed a particular way because it's a very windy place. It was extremely windy in Tulsa. It was really brisk during the winter season in Tulsa. It's a real thing. So it influenced how I saw myself. It influenced how I moved in those environments because I had to dress a particular way. I had to move a particular way. And that was the best thing for me to do in order for me to feel safe and comfortable. I'm thinking about it with my wife. My wife is from Brazil. I've said that on here before. But she's also from an extremely large city in Brazil. And so the way she moves, how she goes through life, how she engages people in a particular way is a byproduct, not of she just being that way. It's a byproduct of the environment she grew up in. When you have a minimum of 750,000 people in your hometown, and then the biggest town in your state in the metropolitan area has 22 million people, you tend to move a particular way. And it's a byproduct of the environment that she's in. That influences the way she thinks. That influences the way she moves. My hometown has somewhere between 150,000 and 170,000 people in it. It's not as busy as her hometown. So the way I move was a little bit different than her. And that's a byproduct of the environment that we are in. This is why this is important for you to know. You have to understand that you are being influenced by geography, you're being influenced by external factors, but none of those things are bad. It's just that you have to be conscious that these things are shaping the way you are engaging the world. These things are shaping the way you talk to people, how you listen, how you consider all the things in your life. These things have a huge impact on what is transpiring in your life right now. And you have to think on those things and consider those things and really be honest about the fact that your life is being affected by those things. Now, I know this last point I'm going to talk about here in a moment is going to be big, but before I get into it, I'm going to start right here, take a great break, and I'll be right back after this message.
Want to promote your business, products, or services? Email me at scottconsultations@gmail.com. I would love to push forward the banner of what you're trying to accomplish, whether it is a product, whether it's your services or your business. I would love to work with you and be an advocate for what you're doing in your respective spaces. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you.
And we are back. Thank you for being here. I hope that you've been inspired to start thinking about the influences in your life and actually start to consider that you have been influenced and you are influencing someone. And I hope that you will really start thinking through that reality in your life. But I got one more point, and I generally have 4, but I have 3 this week. But I think this point is probably the most significant point of 3 points that I have today. And the last one is optional influence. Optional influence. I think it's super critical that we recognize that the first 2 that I talked about are things that we kind of can control. We can choose the family that we were in. We couldn't choose necessarily the school that we went to because a lot of times that's based on where we live and different things like that, and the communities that we come out of. And so that influences how we get educated in many ways. And we couldn't really choose where we decided to do certain things, like literally how your city was set up, whether the street lights were a particular place or the parks were in a particular place or whatever. Like you had no influence. But this last one is something that you do have an influence on, and you are making a conscious choice to engage in. It's optional because it's your decision on who you follow on social media. That's yours. That's not someone else's. It's your decision whose content you decide to engage with on social media. Social media has such a huge influence on the way people perceive themselves and how they live their lives. If you look at your social media feed, you can see what you've been ingesting or you have been digesting every single day. We can look at social media at the macro level, but we can look at a micro level and think about the For You page that you have, whether it be on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat, wherever you get information from. Those spaces have an ability to shape how you think. All of these spaces have algorithms that literally considers all the things that you might like or things that you're liking on social media and all the posts that you might be seeing. And so they start feeding you the same kinds of posts. I started noticing that my social media changed once I got married. When I posted a photo of my wife and I started getting more marriage related content. Or when I start searching for more marriage related content, I start getting more. The algorithm is trying to figure out how to cater to what it thinks that I might want. And this is something that we have to be very sensitive to, because reality is our preferences based on our options influences how we perceive the world. It influences how we think about people, what we think about people, how we engage people around us. These things are optional. We have seen and read stories through reporting that about people getting on in rabbit holes related to information. How they start to get fed information over and over again based on what they're watching or looking at. I notice even with me, like some comedians that I followed on social media or liked on social media, if I start strolling content related to comedy, they start feeding me other comedians who might be kind of in the same space. I start seeing content of other individuals that might be in the same community as this individual. Why? Because the algorithm is trying to cater to what it thinks or perceives that I want. But that's an option. I can search for something else. I can look for another perspective. I can look for something different, but it's up to me. That's an option. My decision to be on a certain social media site is an option. I don't have to be on there. Trust me, I have friends, which is quite shocking, that are around my age who are not really on social media like that, who choose not to engage social media in that regard because they made the option that this is not the way they want to live their lives. That's an option for you. You don't have to do that. You don't have to engage with content. You don't have to engage those things. Yet we are being transformed by what we see on social media. It is influencing how we think. It's influencing how we see people. It is influencing how we're engaging, and we're all victims of it. I'm not saying this as somebody who isn't a victim of it. I'm speaking in a very honest way. I am influenced by what I see on social media, whether it's true or untrue, or partially true, or it's just an opinion that's not based on fact. I am influenced by what I'm seeing, and you are too. You are too. We're all being shaped by what we're seeing. We're all being influenced in our perspective by what we see. We're all being influenced in what we are ingesting every single week when we pick up our phones and engage with content on social media. But that is an option. That's not something you have to do. Not necessary that you do that. And so you have to keep that in mind. What you read and what you watch on television is an option. You do not have to watch what you watch on TV. Or, at this point on our phones, we watch television on our phones, or whatever streaming service you watch. It's a choice. You do not have to pick up your phone and watch that particular show that you like. You don't. But that show or that perspective is shaping you. There are particular sets of shows that people watch a lot of that are shaping the way they see the world. Some of people that might be watching this, listening to this, you like reality television. There's different kinds of reality TV. There's competition shows. My wife loves competition shows. She enjoys them. They're really fascinating and fun for her to watch because she likes the competitive nature. She's a former athlete, so she loves the competitive nature of competition shows. Right? Like that's enjoyable for her. For some people, you like the reality shows that are more lifestyle related. For somebody else, you might like horror shows. You like me, may like documentaries or nature things. Some of you may like scripted shows or unscripted content. Some of you like HGTV, right? Some of you may like dramas and soaps and horror. Like, all of us have preferences of what we like. Does it mean that we are bad people because we have preferences? No. It's just It's just recognizing that those things are influences how we see the world. A very prime example of this, a phenomenon in America of probably the past 30 years or so, are things like court TV, things like Cops, the TV show, one of the big shows in America, a lot of these shows like Blue Bloods and Law and Order, like all these shows, those are shaping how people look at the criminal justice system. It has a way of shaping a perspective for you, whether good or bad. But it's an option to watch it. It's an option to watch reality TV shows. It's an option to watch scripted content. It's an option to watch anything on television. Nobody's making us do it. But our influences are pushing us towards certain types of content. That's just what it is. That's human nature, right? So we have to keep that in mind. We have to also look at the last optional piece that we have is organizational. It's organization. And what I mean by that is your favorite sports team is optional. Your favorite restaurants is optional. You don't have to go to this particular restaurant. You don't have to go to these places. But you're making a choice. My favorite sports teams are the Tennessee Titans. We're having a pretty terrible year this season. But they're my favorite team because my favorite player growing up as a kid was Steve McNair. Steve McNair is from Mississippi. He's from Mount Olive, Mississippi. One of the first games I ever seen on television was the Tennessee Titans playing football. One of the first football games I can vividly remember watching. When they had Eddie George and Kevin Carter and Eric Dyson and Frank Wycheck, and I mean, they had Javon Curse. Like, I remember that team. But that's a choice. I'm a Titans fan by choice. Tennessee Titans fan by choice. I'm a Texas Rangers fan by choice. Right? Like, those are choices. They can change. Right? Like, you have to recognize that you are making choices all the time. You are making decisions all the time, and those things are optional. Again, the restaurants that I eat at are optional. I don't have to eat there. I don't. You don't have to go to the places you like to go to. But it's an option. Hey, I know we sometimes don't want to talk about this one either. But we got to be honest. Your job is an option. Now, I understand there's some realities around that let me be very clear. I'm not oversimplifying the realities of work. Okay, when I say this, I'm not oversimplifying it because I understand that the reality is we have to work in order to take care of our lives. It's just what it is. At the same time, I want to be very clear that one of the realities about taking care of the things we take care of in our lives is that we have to be aware of some of the factors that play into that. Okay. Some of the truths that play into that. You may have chose to go to this job or work at this organization because of things that influence you. It may have been the pay, it may have been the location, it may have been the hours, it may have been the benefits, it may have been the field of study or your experience as far as school that you went to, or your education might have influenced that decision. Or a connection might have influenced that decision. A relationship might have led to you choosing that space. Right? Like but again, that was an option. You may have decided to engage a little bit more because it met some of the criteria that you had. But there's a possibility that you could have turned it down and said no. So what's the point I'm getting at in this whole conversation? I know. You're probably saying, okay, Lee, you're pointing to the things that were external that I had no hand in. It was not my fault that I grew up in the area that I grew up in. That there were things that the communities that I grew up in, we just do because we live in that space, right? There, and I recognize there's some choices that I've made. Why are you talking specifically about influence in that way? I want us to better understand ourselves and understand how we have so much agency to be better, be more productive, be more engaged in a different way. Because if we recognize what we have done or what we are doing in our lives, we will be a little bit more intentional about our decision making. Let's be clear. It's not about being perfect in any way, shape, or fashion, but it is recognizing that I have the ability to change my life by changing my mind and exposing myself to different things. I heard somebody say this in an interview, and I thought it was really profound, that it takes courage, but also a level of intelligence and willingness. And moreover, I think they were saying humility to question your own biases towards issues. You have to have humility to question if your perspective is right or wrong, or your perspective is, if a better way to say it, you have to have have the humility and courage to allow your perspective to evolve. If your perspective is still the same that it was 5 or 10 years ago, it may be a byproduct of your lack of an ability to grow. It doesn't, again, I talk about this all the time. It doesn't mean that you change your principles. It doesn't mean that you change your values. It means that you just evolve. You have a greater perspective or a different view of that particular thing because you're seeing it differently. Your view has expanded some. Prime example. I always use myself as an example anytime I talk about this. There are several things in my life that, as a byproduct of me getting married, me being now in my 30s, me being where I am in my career, that at 25, I didn't have proof of, because I had not experienced it. I had an idea what I thought it might be. I had a concept, but I didn't have a lived experience because the reality was I had not lived through it. And there are things in your life that you have not lived through yet, or you probably won't ever experience. But you just need to be exposed to somebody who has experienced it for you to get a bit of perspective about a particular issue. That is okay. That has the ability to influence how you perceive an issue. I was having a conversation with a dear friend of mine not too long ago, and he was talking to me about a very, very serious issue that is happening in our country and our society right now. How literally it is affecting so many people's lives and it affects so many systems and different things like that. And I was knowledgeable to some degree of the subject, but I wasn't as knowledgeable as him. And so the vast majority of that conversation, I was asking questions. I said, listen, I didn't assume that I knew anything about the subject. But through that conversation, I got more perspective and I learned something. And it has influenced how I think about that particular topic. My hope is today, and my charge today in particular, is that you will question what has influenced you, whether it be good or bad. That you will do a conscious evaluation of what has been affecting your life. Because once you do that, you begin to see yourself in a different perspective, but you also begin to do the self-work. A lot of us need to do self-work. A lot of us need to do some work as it relates to why we think the way we think. Why are we doing some of the things that we're doing? Because so many people's lives are being affected by your inability to evaluate your own life. It takes courage to evaluate. It takes courage and maturity to say, you know what? My opinions might not be completely fact right now. My opinions may not be 100% right. Oh, trust me, I am learning that every day more than ever before now. I'm learning stuff every day about myself and about the people that are in my life. Every day. And it's challenging me to think a little bit different. And so my hope today is that in my 3 points, you recognize that you have to really consider what's influencing you. You got to really consider it. It's optional what influences you now. Because to be clear, people let things that influence them that makes them feel comfortable. Most of the time. A lot of times we like things that reminds us of ourselves and what is familiar. What is familiar to us. Whether it be good or bad. And so we allow those things to dictate to our decision making. This is not a criticism. This is just a legitimate observation. I think about it in my own life. And so my encouragement to you is just do some evaluating. And I hope that as you are evaluating your life, you'll make some slight changes and adjustments in the process. Much love, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you for watching and or listening to this week's episode of Leading with Lee. If you have not done it yet, subscribe on YouTube and all podcasting platforms. If you want to get more information and connect with me, visit me at www.leeascott.com or follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Lee A. Scott II or Lee A. Scott II. So, thank you for watching. Much love, and let's get started.